So good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. It's amazing to hear about all your clubs and the flourishing GAA communities around the world. Most of you, I'd imagine, in this room might not know who we are. So I'll tell you a little bit about that and why I'm here, given that I'm not part of a GAA club, although I'm quite tempted now, I have to be honest. So Crosscare Migrant Project is an organisation based in Dublin. We're funded by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and we were established in the 1980s in response to the increased emigration from Ireland, particularly to the UK, but also further afield. In terms of what we do, we provide pre-departure information to Irish people who are thinking about leaving the country. So that's practical advice on the sorts of things to think about: visas, housing, making contacts with local groups such as your own. We also provide information to Irish people living abroad and who are thinking of returning to Ireland. So that's again information on where to start, really. In some cases we have queries from people who've been away for 30, 40 years who are thinking of coming home. We have queries increasingly from Australia, from families with young children who are thinking of coming home as well. So that ties in with what you were saying, actually, Jared. And we also provide intensive casework support to individuals who are returning in difficult circumstances. So that includes people who have been deported from abroad, people who have been released from prisons, and people returning in crisis, really, to situations that can be very difficult. We're, as I said, part of a much larger network of organisations working to support the Irish diaspora, and funded, as you are, partly by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So one of the reasons I'm here is because of this. None of you will have seen this either, but it is online. It's available on our website, and I'll show you where you can get that. But some of you may have received an email in September or up to November of last year asking you 4 simple questions about your experiences, some of you as immigrants, but also experiences of Irish people who attend your clubs and Irish people who are thinking of Irish people who are thinking of returning to Ireland, and the sorts of things that might stop people who are thinking of coming to Ireland. Really, some of the reasons that we did this is because, again, as I said, we're part of this global network of Irish organisations around the world working to support the Irish diaspora. But your clubs are everywhere. I mean, just looking at the length and breadth of the people who spoke here today, it's quite astounding. So we really wanted to know, look, what are you saying? What are people who are going to your clubs? What are their experiences? So bear with me, sorry, apologies for this. We received over 80 replies from 17 different countries, which was astounding, if I'm honest. We initiated this report thinking, or this survey thinking we'd maybe get 15, 20 responses. The fact that we got over 80 from 17 different countries just goes to show how much people want to talk about their experiences. The responses we received came from Australasia, North America, Asia, Africa, the Middle East. So if any of you in this room participated, I'd like to thank you. One thing that came across very strongly was the fact that the GAA was such a huge support, in particular to people who had recently immigrated. So that's people who maybe had gone to places like Abu Dhabi, further afield even, who didn't have any support networks there. Traditionally, Irish people would have gone and stayed with relatives in London or gone over to New York and stayed with extended family members. This is slightly different. This is really looking at how, I suppose, people can be connected as soon as they arrive somewhere. It can be very difficult to adjust. I mean, a lot of you in this room are immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself. Moving to Ireland the first 3 months, it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. I wish I'd known about it at the GAA and that I could have joined. But these things you learn as you go on, and what we try and do is tell people, look, if you are thinking of emigrating, a good place to start is contact Irish groups that are already established, contact the GAA, contact Irish support organisations abroad, and find out what it's like. Emigration isn't for everyone. Some of the questions we asked you, one of the questions, should I say, that we asked you was, what advice would you give to people who are thinking of emigrating from Ireland? And really, 5 things came back quite strongly. The first thing is, do your research. Seems obvious, but you'd be surprised the number of people that we do speak to who are quite surprised to find out that, well, all sorts of things, really, but things they haven't thought about, even checking whether their passport's up to date in some cases. Prepare as much as possible in advance. The cost of emigration I mean, it can be exorbitantly high for someone who isn't aware of the high cost of living. If they're going to one of the major cities in Canada, they're, I suppose, still thinking of it in terms of Irish terms. The fact that you might need 3 months deposit for accommodation comes as a shock to some people who are thinking of emigrating. So prepare as much as possible is one of the things that you said was very important. Learn the language. For people emigrating to countries outside of the English-speaking world, that's a key thing, and it makes a lot of sense to do. Taking the time to source a job and accommodation, but also connecting, as I said, with Irish people there, and using that as a way to settle into an adopted country. We also asked you what you thought what concerns were of Irish people living in your regions. And it was quite interesting when we grouped these regionally, because for Australasia, so Australia and New Zealand, health and mental health was one of the biggest things that came out of the survey. Real concerns in relation to supports available to people who do have health needs or mental health needs, and knowing really where to start. For Australia, Canada, North America, visas and overstaying. So again, I think that ties in with what the previous speaker just said. For Europe, Asia, Middle East, it was all about social isolation and cultural differences. And I mean, again, this can come down to barriers in terms of language, but also not having traditional support networks that a lot of Irish immigrants would have had in the past. So, connecting with the Irish community abroad. I mean, that's essentially what we are. We're a community. You're all a community. You're all sitting here in the same room talking about all the things that you're doing to bring your community together, and it's fabulous to hear. There's obvious benefits of being part of a GAA club abroad. I mean, it promotes well-being, it provides a starting point for people who have just emigrated, but it also provides more than that. It provides a sense of community. So one of the things I'd like to say to you today, you're all thinking about ways to reach out to your local communities, but think about people whose experience of immigration hasn't been necessarily as positive as yours might have been. There are people, particularly people that we work with, who would have higher support needs. They would find themselves isolated, and in some cases think about returning to Ireland because they feel alone. There are a lot of organisations, as I said, that do work for the welfare of Irish immigrants, and they might have some of them in your areas as well. Maybe not in Argentina, but I think there are groups in North America that potentially could be a huge source of support for a club like yourselves, and for other clubs as well, further afield. So getting informed about Irish groups in your area is a good starting point. Most of you, I'm sure, will be in contact with them, but it's just something worth thinking about. Reach out to people in your community who you think might need a little bit of support. And then staying in touch with developments for Irish immigrants. There's been an awful lot that's gone on with this government and the previous government. We have our second Minister for the Diaspora here, in fact, but that was a huge development. There is a new Diaspora policy, and all of this information is available on the DFA website, so I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but that's all there, and that's a great resource for yourselves, just in terms of looking at the way that Ireland's thinking about you abroad, if you like. You can check out one of the websites that we have, which is mindhowyougo.ie. It's based on the experiences of Irish immigrants who have left in the last 5 years. We got 500 responses, a similar survey to the one that we put out to you. But it really covers everything from when someone's thinking of emigrating to when they just arrived, to a few months in, to possibly staying on for longer. And you can contact us as well. So to find out more, I'll be at the GAA Global Games Hub tomorrow. Come over, say hello, it'd be a pleasure to meet you. As part of my role within Crosscare, I do travel a little bit. I'm going over to Canada relatively soon, so John, perhaps I'll see you there. But again, get in touch. This is all about communicating and being part of the one community. You can follow us on Twitter. There's a lot of talk about social media at the beginning, so for those of you who are on social media, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and you can also see our website, which is www.migrantproject.ie, and even sign up for our newsletter. I wish you all the best for the World Games. Thank you very much.